In a time of turmoil, when cities fell under the roar of conquest, one night in Jerusalem would be remembered for its silence. This is not a tale of blood and steel, but of restraint, mercy, and grace. In 1187, Salahuddin captured Jerusalem, but unlike the First Crusaders who left the streets drenched in blood, not a single civilian was harmed. Why did Salahuddin defy the brutal norms of war and offer mercy? The legacy of 1099, Jerusalem's bloodied past. In the summer of 1099, Crusader armies reached Jerusalem after years of bloodshed across the Levant. The First Crusade, driven by religious zeal, saw the Holy City as the ultimate prize. The siege began in June, and by July 15th, the walls were breached. What followed was horrific. Tens of thousands of Muslims and Jews were massacred. Blood filled the streets, and sacred places like the Al-Aqsa Mosque and synagogues became scenes of slaughter. The Crusaders transformed Jerusalem into the capital of their Latin kingdom. Islamic landmarks were repurposed. The Dome of the Rock became the Temple of the Lord. Muslims and Jews were driven out, their homes and worship sites defiled. The city's diverse past was overwritten with exclusivity and fear. For Christians, this was a divine victory, but for the Muslim world, it was a deep wound. The massacre became a symbol of injustice, passed down through generations. Jerusalem, revered in the Quran and Islamic history, became a lost sanctuary. Before 1199, Jerusalem was a multicultural hub. Arabs, Jews, and Christians coexisted, trading and worshiping side by side. That harmony was shattered. The Crusaders' Jerusalem was built on conquest and exclusion, replacing diversity with domination. Though the Crusaders ruled for nearly a century, their grip was fragile. Muslim powers remained divided, but figures like Nur ad-Din Zengi began to unite them under a banner of religious duty to reclaim the Holy Land. By the mid-12th century, momentum was building. Still, one question loomed. If Muslims retook Jerusalem, would they repeat the horrors of 1099? Was vengeance inevitable? As the city waited for what seemed like another bloodbath, a new leader emerged, Salahuddin. Unlike the Crusaders, he sought justice, not revenge. A devout Muslim and brilliant tactician, he believed conquest could come with mercy. In 1187, the stage was set. The world turned its gaze to Jerusalem once again. Would its fate echo the past, or begin a new legacy under Salahuddin? Salahuddin, the man behind the vision. Salahuddin Yusuf ibn Ayyub was born in 1137 in Tikrit, a Kurdish child raised in a devout household marked by discipline and a deep sense of duty. His father served under the Seljuks, and early on, Salahuddin was shaped by stories of faith, justice, and leadership. As a young man, he moved to Damascus and trained under his uncle Shirkuh, a general serving Nur ad-Din Zengi. At the time, the Muslim world was deeply divided, more focused on internal rivalries than confronting the Crusaders in Jerusalem. Though not initially known for ambition, Salahuddin grew into a strategic thinker, measured, patient, and disciplined. His leadership style prioritized justice over domination. When Shirkuh died, Salahuddin unexpectedly rose to power in Egypt in 1169. He dismantled the Fatimid Caliphate, restoring Sunni rule and bringing stability to a once chaotic land. After Nur ad-Din's death, Salahuddin took on the mission of unifying the Muslim world. Through diplomacy and military strength, he gained control over Syria, Mesopotamia, and beyond, not for personal power, but to build a united front capable of reclaiming Jerusalem. Salahuddin believed deeply in a moral form of jihad. a spiritual and societal effort to uphold righteousness. His campaigns were marked by mercy and restraint. He negotiated peace when possible, treated enemies with honor, and governed with fairness. His concept of leadership merged strength with humility. By the time he turned his eyes toward Jerusalem, Salahuddin had unified once fractured lands. His goal wasn't revenge for 1099. It was to restore the city as a place of peace, faith, and justice. The world watched not just to see if he would succeed, but how he would do so. The turning point, the Battle of Hattin. In July 1187, the fate of Jerusalem was shaped far from its walls. On the arid plains near Hattin, Salahuddin's forces met the Crusader army led by King Guy of Lusignan. This wasn't just another clash. It was the culmination of years of rising tension and strategy. For Salahuddin, it was a chance to end a century of Crusader dominance. For the Crusaders, it was a desperate effort to hold their ground. The Crusaders, though numerous, were fractured. King Guy's leadership was questioned, and his ally Raynald of Châtillon had repeatedly provoked Muslims with raids, violating truces and stoking outrage. Salahuddin, in contrast, had prepared meticulously with a united army of archers and agile cavalry, fighting not just for land, but for justice. The terrain worked in Salahuddin's favor. Water was scarce, and he controlled the springs. When the Crusaders left their fortified base at Sephoria to march toward Tiberias, lured by a feigned Muslim raid, they walked into a trap. Salahuddin's forces harassed them relentlessly, draining their strength in the searing heat. By the time they reached the plains of Hattin, the Crusaders were exhausted, dehydrated, and encircled. Salahuddin sealed off water sources and even set fire to dry brush, filling the air with choking smoke. Trapped near the twin hills known as the Horns of Hattin, the Crusaders dug in, but there was no escape. On July 4th, Salahuddin launched his assault. Arrows rained down, cavalry pressed in, and the Crusader ranks broke. King Guy was captured, along with many nobles. Raynald was executed by Salahuddin himself, a response not of cruelty, but of justice for his prior atrocities. Yet Salahuddin's mercy shone through. Most prisoners were spared or ransomed, and high-ranking captives treated with respect. The relic of the true cross fell into Muslim hands, symbolizing a shift in power and faith. The Battle of Hattin wasn't just a military victory. It shattered Crusader morale. Salahuddin's restraint set him apart from previous conquerors. He now looked to Jerusalem, not for vengeance, but restoration. As his army turned toward the holy city, the world held its breath, waiting to see how this leader of discipline and mercy would reclaim one of the holiest sites on earth. The siege without fire, diplomacy at the gates of Jerusalem. In October 1187, Salahuddin's army reached the gates of Jerusalem, surrounding the city after their triumph at Hattin. Inside, Balian of Ibelin led the defenders, knowing resistance was futile. Supplies were scarce, morale low, and memories of the 1099 massacre haunted the people. Fearing vengeance, panic and dread spread among civilians, many of whom prepared for death. But Salahuddin's camp was calm and orderly. He made clear that Jerusalem was not a prize to be taken by brutality. While he launched controlled attacks on the walls, he kept channels open for negotiation. His goal wasn't destruction, it was justice and redemption. Balian and Salahuddin eventually met. Balian warned that if the city were stormed, its defenders would destroy the Christian holy sites to deny them to the victors. Salahuddin, however, rejected such bloodshed. He offered generous terms. If the city surrendered, civilians would be spared, and religious sites protected. Those who could afford ransoms could leave freely. Moved by Balian's appeal for the poor, Salahuddin extended mercy even further, offering to fund the freedom of many captives. His leadership reflected a deep commitment to compassion, not conquest. On October 2nd, Jerusalem surrendered. Salahuddin's forces entered the city not as destroyers, but as guardians. Mosques were restored, churches left untouched, and families safely escorted out. His men were strictly ordered to show restraint and respect. The evacuation was peaceful and dignified. Women, children, and the elderly received special care. Even many who could not pay ransoms were granted freedom. News of this mercy stunned Europe and earned Salahuddin admiration from both Christian and Muslim chroniclers. He had reclaimed the holy city not through terror, but through honor. Jerusalem's story was rewritten, not with fire, but with mercy. In contrast to the Crusaders' bloodshed decades earlier, Salahuddin's conquest stood as a beacon of justice. His actions redefined leadership in an age dominated by vengeance, leaving a legacy that would echo across generations. A victory of mercy, the aftermath in Jerusalem. When Salahuddin entered Jerusalem on October 2nd, 1187, it wasn't with fire or fury, it was with restraint. The city remained calm. No looting, no destruction. His soldiers, under strict orders, marched in with dignity. Holy sites were preserved. The Dome of the Rock was restored, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre remained untouched. In stark contrast to the horrors of 1099, Jerusalem witnessed a peaceful transition. Civilians expected vengeance, but Salahuddin delivered protection. Wealthier residents paid ransoms and left safely. For the poor, Salahuddin personally contributed funds to secure their release. Chroniclers describe him walking among the destitute, pledging not to let poverty condemn them. His officers followed his lead, turning conquest into compassion. Christian clergy confirmed that churches were unharmed and rituals respected. Salahuddin even invited Jewish families, once exiled under Crusader rule, to return and rebuild. Jerusalem began to resemble a city of coexistence rather than conquest. News of Salahuddin's mercy spread across the Muslim world. Poets and scholars praised his justice. Even European chroniclers admitted his nobility. Compared to the massacre of 1099, his restraint stood as a moral rebuke. His leadership embodied Quranic ideals, compassion in strength, mercy in victory. Some allies viewed his leniency as a mistake, fearing future retaliation. But Salahuddin stayed true to his values. Reclaiming Jerusalem was a sacred duty, not an opportunity for revenge. His goal was not domination, but restoration. As the last Crusaders exited, Jerusalem began a quiet revival. Mosques reopened, but Christian and Jewish sites remained respected. Rather than scars, Salahuddin's victory left healing. His actions reshaped the expectations of war. He showed that mercy, not might, could inspire lasting reverence. In both Christian and Muslim memory, his legacy stood as a beacon of justice, one that continues to echo through time. The legacy of a gentle conqueror. Salahuddin's conquest of Jerusalem in 1187 resonated deeply across the Muslim and Christian worlds. For Muslims, it was a long-awaited triumph, an end to decades of humiliation since 1099. But more than the victory itself, it was Salahuddin's mercy that left a lasting impression. Chroniclers praised him not just as a warrior, but as a leader who embodied justice, restraint, and faith. He sought not to dominate Jerusalem, but to restore it as a sacred, shared city. In Europe, the reaction was mixed with sorrow and awe. While Christians mourned the loss of the Holy City, many admired Salahuddin's conduct. Even adversaries like William of Tyre described him as wise and generous. His treatment of prisoners and preservation of holy sites defied the brutality of the age and stood in stark contrast to the Crusaders' own actions decades earlier. Salahuddin's restraint became a reference point. In an era where brutality was the norm, he chose mercy. His decision to spare Jerusalem rather than destroy it gave rise to an image that transcended religious lines. Even Richard the Lionheart, his fiercest opponent in the Third Crusade, called him a great prince. His diplomacy shaped future interactions between Muslims and Christians. While Crusaders would return, the idea that peace could coexist with conflict lingered. Some Muslims questioned his leniency, fearing it allowed enemies to recover. But Salahuddin remained steadfast, guided by principle over revenge. His mercy wasn't performative. It reflected his belief in leadership as a divine trust. Salahuddin combined strength with ethics, justice with humility. That balance made him not just a conqueror, but a model of Islamic governance. In Europe, he entered legend as a noble adversary, chivalrous, compassionate, and honorable. Centuries later, Salahuddin's legacy endures. His ability to unify, to lead with purpose, and to value mercy over wrath offers timeless lessons. He reminded the world that true greatness lies not in conquest, but in how one wields power. His victory in Jerusalem became a turning point in history, proof that humanity can prevail, even in war. Conclusion: Salahuddin's conquest of Jerusalem was not just the reclaiming of a city, it was a redefinition of power. In an age dominated by brutal conquests, he showcased a different approach, where mercy triumphed over vengeance and justice replaced destruction. Jerusalem became more than a prize. It was a testament to the possibilities of leadership guided by principle. His actions challenge us today. What lessons can we draw from a ruler who chose to heal rather than harm? The night Jerusalem stood still was more than a moment in history. It was proof that even amidst war, the values of humanity can still endure.